Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, are you as excited for that backdoor cover as the rest of Twitter?
Oh my God, yeah. Look, more excited even. I can't, if you can believe it. Yeah, I've got a couple of parlays on the line, which I remember a couple years ago, back when Dusty was the host of the show.
And not in the hole?
Yeah. I mean, he's still very much alive, so I don't know why that keeps coming up. But
people are just convinced we have him in a hole somewhere. We don't. And if we did, he has a cell phone repeater down there, so he's able to access stuff and be able to tweet.
Right, yeah. If he was in a hole, he'd be treated very well.
We are not animals.
But yeah, I remember Dusty and I both agreeing that parlays are for dummies and that you shouldn't do them, and you multiply the VIG that way. And I still do them because they're very fun.
Well, that's kind of the problem, isn't it, then? I really should take my own advice, but...
Oh, well.
It's only money. It's fine. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. We have lots to talk about, including a preview of the Colts game and a pretty big mailbag for you. But before we start, just want to thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code, for supporting it, whether it be through Patreon or even just sending a link out on social media saying, hey, check this out. Sending out to a friend, hey, the new episode, did you hear what it was called? It was called Defund the RB. Stuff like that. We appreciate anything that you guys are willing to do for us. If you enjoy the show and would like to donate to it, you can do so in one of two different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode, and that will be that is like a subscription-based donation. You can do anything you'd like, $1, but most people choose $3.50 to help keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay and to have access to the bonus content that we put out. So if you would like access to that, you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well, and for $41.98, you get access to a full year's worth of the Patreon material. I just provide you with a Dropbox link that I update every week with the new episode. So if you are interested in doing that and would prefer not to do a Patreon thing, by all means, go over to paypal.me/NorseCode and find yourself over there. We do have two things to mention real quick. We have two Patreon people to quick mention. We have Joe Philibert. Just want to thank you, Joe. Really, thank you a lot. Really do appreciate it. Also, we have Peter Hawkinson. I'm hoping to pronounce that correctly. I asked for a pronunciation and I did not receive one. So, Peter, this is for you. Peter Hawkinson, who messaged us saying, greetings from Sweden. Finally a podcast that hates turkey, the bird, and loves Vikings. Thank you, Peter. Really do appreciate it. So, all of our shilling aside, let's get into the show and let's get into what came out, I believe, today, which is that there is an injury to Pat Elflein that is going to send him over to IR for at least 3 weeks.
Yeah, so, this is a pretty clear indication that teams, and especially the Vikings, are using injured reserve as a way to, have just a limited roster exemption for a short period of time. And it really seems like they didn't really put him on IR with the intention of having him out for the season. But obviously we don't know. They won't tell us, so who knows what happens. We also know that we were assured that Danielle Hunter would return by week 1, and he didn't. So who knows, right? But IR is not as alarming as it used to be. It just presents this large field of uncertainty, whereas before it didn't. And it turns out that on Wednesday, he was not on the injury report and injured his thumb during practice, according to Tom Pelissero at the NFL Network. And so they decided, he was unlikely to return within the next 3 weeks, so they might as well create a roster exemption by putting him on injured reserve and then, having the ability to call him up at any time. They haven't made a concurrent move yet. I imagine that they'll probably promote Brett Jones up from the practice squad because they don't have a backup center right now. So yeah, you'll move a guard, maybe Drew Samia, up to guard, and then have Brett Jones as your center. But Yeah, I can't imagine a lot of fans are too beat up about this just because of the reputation that Pat Elflein has among fans. Um, he didn't look as bad as we're used to seeing last week, so that's kind of something to think about as he goes on IR, and then also probably a good indication that, um, as a reminder, things can always get worse. And so if Drew Samia struggles a lot more, it is possible, right? That means that he is in fact a downgrade over Pat Elflein, which a lot of people were convinced was impossible. And I want to tell you, based off of his play last week, it's possible. He was clearly like the worst in terms of giving up pressure, but he was pretty great in the run game, and it is possible to be bad at the run game and also give up that much pressure. So we'll see.
So if I throw three names at you and have you kind of decide which one is like the better player in at this point in Elflein's career. So the three names are from Vikings history. It would be Pat Elflein, and you go Matt Khalil, and you go TJ Clemmings. And
Wow.
at this point in career, because Khalil was good his rookie year.
Right. If I could pick Pete Khalil, obviously that would be
but you're not getting that opportunity. Right. You are getting how many years?
I get year 4 Khalil, year 4 Clemmings, and year 4 Elflein, right? That's what we're saying?
That is what we're saying.
I would take the order would be Khalil, Elflein, Clemmings, I think.
Just firing Clemmings into the sun.
Yeah, you'd have to. Unfortunately. He
actually, you wouldn't have to fire him. You could just push him. He was easily pushed.
Yeah, that's one of the issues, right?
Yeah.
So the thing with Elflein is that there is value there, right? Like he's an abysmal pass protector. He was an abysmal pass protector last week, but he gets you a lot of movement in the run game, and he's really great in the screen game. He can move downfield and identify second level blockers, and he's demonstrated like double team chemistry with Garrett Bradbury and stuff like that. So there is value there. There's something, right? And it comes in a less valuable area of the game. But Clemmings was just like not good at any of that at all. Like name an area of football and he would be bad at that thing. Great guy. I don't want to like beg him too much. He was actually really fun to talk to and he was like really conscientious and stuff. So that was really cool. But as a football player, he was just like not very good at all at anything. So yeah, I'd have to pick Elflein over him. And then Khalil, so he had that screen utility. He was not as good a run blocker as Elflein is, but he's also like a much better pass protector. He like wasn't a good one, obviously, but he was a much better pass protector in year 4 of his career, which is right before like the weird option year where the Vikings picked up his option and were on the hook for like $11 million against the cap. But
when I believe our podcast was like, well, so money doesn't mean anything to the Minnesota Vikings anymore.
Yeah, right. It put us down on the path of cap nihilism.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say that Khalil was better than Elflein, which that's probably an indictment. I would think of Elflein.
I'm not saying it's a backhanded compliment, but I am saying that he's second. This also was not the only move that the Vikings made roster-wise this week. They also signed George Iocca to, I believe, the practice squad.
Yeah. Just because, he wasn't getting any offers. So if you can pay him less, you can pay him less. They had a free practice squad roster spot open, I think, because Hardy Nickerson was activated. I could probably triple check that if I really wanted to. But yeah, they get to pay him like a third as much as they normally would, which, that's not like wonderful or anything like that for Iocca, but he wasn't, getting any money. So it's something. No, Nate Metters was activated. Hardy Nickerson was like temporarily activated. And so, Iocca just takes up a free available roster spot. He can be an instant activation on game day. You get up to 2 every week. And so, it provides veteran safety depth, and the Vikings didn't have any. There's not a ton there. Obviously, he has experience with the Vikings back in 2018 as a backup, and he has experience in the Mike Zimmer system. He's been a long-time Bengal. So, yeah, probably a smart move. I was kind of surprised he was still available. I was kind of surprised that the Cowboys cut him. But the fact that he wasn't getting any play at all in the market is maybe an indication that there's a lot less there, that he just wasn't acing his workouts or something like that. So, yeah, when we asked Zimmer about safety depth, he promised that he would have it on game day. To that end, he promoted Nate Metters, and now they've signed Georgia Loca, which is interesting because they could have signed him to the practice squad at any time without having to worry about week one guarantees. And so typically when you see vets signed in week two, that's a way to avoid the veteran salary guarantee throughout the year. Whereas on the practice squad, it kind of just doesn't exist. So they could have just done it before. I don't know. But there you have it. He's a guy.
He's a guy, and he's signed to the practice squad. So we'll just take that and move on. Also, let's go over to an interview that you cut earlier today with Jake Arthur. He is from allcolts.com, and this is going to preview the Sunday matchup of the Colts and the Vikings.
All right, I'm with Jake Arthur, who I guess he just launched the first episode of his own new podcast, the Believe in Colts podcast, which is part of the Believe Network, which is spelled BLEAV. He's also part of SI Now's network at allcolts.com. Did I nail that, Jake, or did I screw that up?
No, you absolutely nailed it, buddy.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so obviously we're here to talk about the Vikings-Colts matchup. The Vikings don't play the Colts all that often. I think the last time they played, was it 2013?
2016.
2016. Oh, yeah. Probably.
It was memorable for us because it was a Andrew Luck fingerless glove and elbow pad game. Not very aesthetically pleasing.
Fair enough. Yeah, so we're going to go through the Colts roster, the Colts matchup. Before we go through any of the position groups and stuff like that, I think a lot of people were kind of surprised, except for Jaguars fans, at the Colts kind of screwing the pooch in Jacksonville, which I guess they do fairly often. Jaguars fans were telling me that the Colts just don't win in Jacksonville, but aside from what seems to be kind of like a Vikings in Chicago style curse, just real quick, what happened in that game?
Yeah, they did get off to a fast start once Marlon Mack before he blew out his Achilles there. They started really hot in the first quarter. The running game and the screen game looked awesome, and overall they actually outgained the Jaguars by over 200 yards of offense. But it was just a lot of self-inflicted wounds. There were some penalties. Phillip Rivers threw a couple picks. There was a couple really poorly timed drops on the final drive. But on defense, even though they were able to get to Gardner Minshew, they sacked him 4 times. He was just so efficient. He was taking everything they were giving him, went 19 for 20. It was just really a lot of them shooting themselves in the foot, and there were some blown coverages that led to some touchdowns. 2 of the 3 were just where the defensive back just totally was not in position to make the play, and then the middle one, Laviska Shenault's first NFL touchdown, just poor tackling and angles on that. So it's really just a matter of not playing disciplined football and just shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like the Vikings last week. Let's say we can chalk that up to having no preseason, maybe a cleaner game this week. Let's talk a little bit about Phillip Rivers, I think is kind of the highlight here. Obviously, the Colts brought in a number of players, including a draft class that I think a lot of people are interested in. Unfortunately, some of them are injured, including Michael Pittman. But I think that Phillip Rivers is kind of what's leading the interesting charge here. Last time the Vikings played Rivers, it was the Chargers, obviously, and the Chargers gave up 7 turnovers. 3 of them were Rivers interceptions. It feels like shooting oneself in the foot is kind of a Rivers staple, and I say that as somebody who thinks he should go to the Hall of Fame. I love him, but it's kind of the guy he is, right?
Yeah, it's sometimes you just watch what he's doing, and it's just in his DNA. It's that Brett Favre gene. They just go to make a play that they think they can make, and it just is not there to be made, or the window is not even just really slightly open. It's not even quite there. Those guys have kind of a Superman complex, but it's gotten them to where they are today. Rivers is probably going to finish the season passing Dan Marino in career passing yards and touchdowns. So that's nothing to snuff at. The good thing, I guess, is he knows the mistakes he's made with those throws pretty much instantly. He had clear answers for us right after the game. He threw 2 interceptions. One of them was called back, but the first one, they play Jacksonville twice a year. Todd Wash has been there as the defensive coordinator for a few years, but they threw a brand new wrinkle at him on that play, and they just weren't expecting it, and he just made a bad read. And then the second one, he said he just didn't use his eye discipline good enough and look off the defender, and he just didn't quite lead Paris Campbell enough, and the safety was able to pick it off. So he knows exactly the problem. He pretty much regrets the throw as soon as it's leaving his hand. So that stuff is correctable because he knows the issue. But that's been the story of his career. You get, and it's kind of the same thing with Andrew Luck. You get some really breathtakingly accurate throws, just some dimes, and then you get some head scratchers sometimes. But as long as you're getting wins and there's more good than bad, you kind of live with those.
Yeah, that's fair. At this stage in his career, do you think that he's on a substantial decline? Because I think that was like a big discussion last year, hidden a little bit by the fact that he was really unlucky in a bunch of one-score games last year, which is not to say, he wasn't responsible for some of those losses, but like 5 of those losses, I don't know if they were really on him in those one-score games. But, the aggregate statistics are down. We've been kind of having this discussion about Rivers going all the way back to 2013. He bounced back a couple of times, was one of the few players to not get injured to win a Comeback Player of the Year award. Like that's how bad he was, and that's how good he became. Yeah. And then he kind of slid back down again. Where do you see him right now at this point in his career?
It's hard to say that he's losing it. He did have an awesome 2018 season. It's just it's really murky because of course he's older, he's losing arm strength, but he's at least the last several years with the Chargers, his offensive lines have been not great at all. That those Chargers teams were always just so snake bitten with injuries to major players too. And although his arm strength is diminished now, I think he knows that he can rely on timing and throwing the ball to a spot downfield and letting the receiver get to it rather than trying to just uncork a bomb. So he understands that his arm strength isn't what it used to be, and he's kind of able to adjust to it. But I don't think he's lost it. It's of course been a pretty small sample size, just one game and no preseason, and training camp wasn't open, and there's no OTAs this year. So I think we'll see a bit of a turnaround and things start to smooth out a bit. But for a guy with his playing style, it's easy to question if he's lost it just because he's kind of got that gunslinger to him. But he's still deadly accurate when he's making those reads and he gives himself time. But there is that stuff where he has a tendency to, throw off his back foot, off balance, and try to maybe make a throw that's not there. But again, I think we'll probably see more good than bad by the time the season's over.
Well, so part of his playing style also involves, trusting his receivers. He loves to throw, not just we talked a little bit about in double coverage, but also he kind of loves those contested catch guys. Keenan Allen's very good at it, kind of underrated. Mike Williams very good at it. Tyrell Williams led the league last year, or was like 5th in the league last year in contested catch rate, which is kind of wild. It's something that he kind of relied on going all the way back to, having Vincent Jackson in San Diego. These guys, with the Colts, they don't strike me as contested catch guys. T.Y. Hilton hasn't ranked very highly in contested catch rate when you look at PFF or Player Profiler. Paris Campbell didn't strike me as that guy coming out of college. Michael Pittman, yeah, sure. I don't know how many snaps he's going to get, but these don't really seem like contested catch kind of players. And then you think about the tight ends, and I mean, to me, Jack Doyle's a blocking tight end. I don't know, maybe I'm like way off base here, but they don't seem like the kind of style of receiver that we're kind of used to seeing with Rivers.
No, you're right. T.Y. Hilton hasn't really been a contested catch guy, and of course his size plays a role in that. He's usually a little smaller than who he's going up against. Paris, we haven't seen that yet. Like you said, in college, he didn't really come off that way. He was always in space, it seemed. Pittman really is that would be that top guy you look at in that department on this roster. And I think that's why a lot of people fell in love with that pick, giving Michael Pittman to Phillip Rivers, that big-bodied contested catch guy. I think we'll see Pittman a little, given if he's able to play this week. I think we'll see him a little more, him and Rivers get a little more chemistry. He only had a couple catches last week. Outside of that, you're probably looking at Zach Pascal, who has some of the strongest hands I've seen on this roster in several years. Desmond Patman, he's probably going to be a healthy scratch guy because they've got 7 receivers on the roster right now. Patman is another guy they drafted, 6'4", 225. They're still getting him to understand how big and strong he actually is and play that way. But for now, yeah, you're really only looking at Pittman and Pascal as your contested guys. Jack Doyle, he's more of a chain mover. They get him a lot of catches on the move. He's not always in a lot of contested catch situations. And then Trey Burton, we just don't really know yet. He's been on IR. I'm honestly not all that familiar with his Chicago game. From my understanding, he's kind of been a good yards after catch guy too. So again, not so much of a contested catch guy. So it is something they're lacking in general on this roster, but the moves they've made at receiver since Chris Ballard has been here kind of points to that being the type of receiver he likes.
All right, yeah. Well, let's talk about another kind of hallmark of the way Ballard's kind of run this organization. A lot of investment in the offensive line. Obviously, everyone knows about Quentin Nelson, but this entire offensive line seems like it's gotten a lot of recent significant investment. Whether that's Ryan Kelly, first-round pick, obviously re-signing Anthony Costanzo to a long deal, Braden Smith. It feels like this offensive line is a lot better than even 3 years ago when we were talking about the Colts and Andrew Luck, and certainly a lot better than anything that Rivers had over the past 5 years in San Diego. Is this, one of the better offensive lines in football, or am I a little bit too enamored by the draft capital that's spent on this line? How do you evaluate it, at least with regards to pass protection?
Yeah, I think you're right. Chris Ballard and Frank Reich, both of them, their philosophy basically is, if our roster is going to be good at anything, it's going to be good on the lines, offensive and defensive. And so far, so good with the pass protection this year. This line specifically has gotten notoriety for being one of the more dominant run blocking lines on occasion over the last year and a half. The run game finished 7th last year. They've had several 150-yard, 200-yard rushing games over the last couple years. But just going off of this year, offensive coordinator Nick Sirianni, when he spoke to the media this week, he said that the pass protection that they gave Rivers last week against the Jaguars was one of the best displays of pass protection that Sirianni has seen since he's been in the NFL. So far they get a really big check mark there. And that's great news because when you look at a guy like Braden Smith, the starting right tackle, his niche is run blocking. And, of course, he was a guard in college, and they made him a tackle coming out as a rookie. So he's been developing a little bit each year. And they're just, his pass protection needed to catch up with his run blocking. And it's apparently looking pretty good so far. Mark Glowinski as well. He's the only one that they really haven't drafted and groomed. He was a free agent. I think they signed him to a futures deal after the Seahawks let him go a few years ago. But that line has just really gelled really well. Those starting 5 guys have been together since week 6 of 2018. So that's very rare in the NFL. No one missed a start last year, I don't think. Only missed a handful of snaps in general. So that line, cohesion is key. A lot of offensive line coaches will tell you that. And they've been able to stay healthy enough to really gel together successfully.
Well, one thing that they've had a little bit of trouble with is specifically Yannick Ngakoue, who has had a little bit of success, especially in 2018. Obviously, 2017 was his big year, but in 2018 he did a pretty good job against the Colts offensive line. 2017 he had 22% pressure rate when he was playing against the Colts, and it looks like his pressure rate against the Colts, which I assume was primarily lined up against Costanzo, I didn't double check, over the past 3 years was a 16.3%, which over the course of a full season would rank seventh in the NFL. His total pressures over the past 3 years is 31, which over the course of a 16-game season would be 83 pressures, which would rank first in the NFL over a 16-game season. So that's not bad. Have you noticed him being like particularly disruptive? And what does he do that makes him potentially a bad matchup for that Colts offensive line?
Yeah, absolutely. He's stuck out in pretty much every matchup for the past few years, particularly in those games in Jacksonville. And of course, they had Calais Campbell. They always had such deep defensive lines that would just maul the Colts, and Ngakoue just always seemed to get home and either help a sack or get one himself, cause a fumble. There was one game he got an interception. He's just done so much, and I think it's his length and his speed and explosion that just has really done it. And he's given the business to Costanzo and Braden Smith both. I think they just maybe struggle with his length and his ability to get lower, and he can get a really quick jump off the ball. But he's really been a thorn in the Colts side the last few years. He's someone I've got circled for this matchup for sure, because of course he's gone from the Jaguars, but now they can't get away from him. They're facing him in week 2.
Okay, cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about. So I have a feeling that the Vikings are not going to be blitzing that much. It's one of Rivers' strengths is his ability against the blitz. He's kind of rare in that he's one of the few quarterbacks that's substantially better against the blitz than not. But the players that are kind of responsible for that, first, Rivers is really excellent at calling protections, but second, the running backs and the tight ends are really important for that. So let's talk a little bit about the running backs first in terms of how they might help stop that pass rush, but then also the kind of players that they are. So the first, obviously, is Jonathan Taylor, who, drafted, I think, out of Wisconsin, right? A lot of people didn't expect him to run the 40 that he did. Turns out that's also his field speed. If last week is any indication, he's a pretty fast guy. He's also pretty powerful. What does he bring to bear first as a pass protector in terms of his ability to stop blitzes or extra rushers into the lane, and second, at his real job, how he is running and catching the football?
Yeah, so pass protection is probably the newest thing they're working on with him at Wisconsin. Participating in the passing game just wasn't something they really implemented for him all that much until his final year, both pass protection and receiving. So they really didn't know what to expect a whole lot when they got him. But I mean, so far so good with the receiving part of it. He caught all 6 targets last week. Pass protection, I think he'll be plenty capable of doing it. He's a really bright guy when you talk to him. He wants to be successful, really smart. And he's certainly got the right running backs coach to help him get there, and Tom Rathman. They feel he's capable. They've mentioned it because he's now the starting running back with Marlon Mack down.
Right.
Mack was their best pass protector and really their most complete 3-down back. So now it's going to be up to Taylor to pick a little bit of that up. But in general, they also like what they've got in Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins as 3-down backs. They see all of them as guys who could carry the load all game long. So I'm a little curious to see, in this debut of Taylor as a starter, how much he'll be in on pass protection, just because they already have 2 other satisfactory options. But everything they have seemed to say about his protection lately has been, he's capable, and they're still working with him on it.
So he's 225, 226 pound back, ran an official 4.39 at the combine, hand time 4.32. Broad jump 123 inches, 3 cone 701. So athletically, he's everything, right? He's big, he's fast, he's quick, he's explosive. What element to that do appear on the field for you, and what do you think might be kind of a misnomer, or does he display all of those capabilities as a runner, and how important is that athleticism to his game?
So that speed, when I studied him coming into the draft, you saw plenty of breakaway plays, but I guess for some reason it just didn't look like he was moving at the speed of light and breaking away from everybody.
Yeah, I think everybody got that. I
Yeah,
was shocked too.
yeah. I guess it looked like a product of really good blocking. I think we all knew he was a good runner, but that the very first touch he had on Sunday last week against the Jaguars, it was a screen pass with great blocking. He took it 35 yards downfield inside the 5-yard line, almost scored, but he hit that extra gear. You could absolutely see the speed. He got it, and then once he saw the opening and that he wasn't going to be touched for a while, he took off, and you could absolutely see the speed. One thing I feel like I had marked on him coming in was I thought he tried to bust it out a little too often. Like, he's obviously a powerful guy, but you wanted to see him maybe stick inside the tackles or the A gap or something a little more often. I think he only ran it like 8 or 9 times on Sunday, so we didn't get a huge sample size. Yeah. But
there's a thing with young backs that happen to be pretty fast is they like to get to the outside and bust it open.
Yeah, exactly. I would like to see what he's going to look like running inside this week. I mean, if he runs inside behind Ryan Kelly and Quentin Nelson, I think he's going to be perfectly fine. So we'll see. But yeah, I think all the total package altogether, I do see it on the field.
And then behind him is Nyheim Hines, who at NC State was he the one that was also a tight end? I'm trying to remember.
I think that was Jalen Samuels.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they had the two running backs that were just bizarre because I know the other one. So I guess in this case, Nyheim Hines, originally committed as a receiver, was also on their track team. Which tells you a lot, I guess, about the kind of player that he is. Ran 0.01 seconds faster than Jonathan Taylor in the 40-yard dash officially. Mm-hmm. But seems to be generally, kind of like what Mike Boone is for the Vikings, much more of a scat back, kind of a receiving back, but has had to, I think, take on the burden of being a more complete back because of the Marlon Mack injury. How capable is he of that? Is that something that they're going to kind of project for him, or do you kind of see him as that kind of, for the Vikings, Mike Boone, for the Bears, Tariq Cohen? I'm an NFC North guy, so I'm thinking of like Theo Riddick and all those guys. But you mm-hmm. get what I'm getting at. Is he more of that guy, or can he be a complete back?
No, I think they plan on using him a little more often than those guys. We've seen him in on early downs, even running the ball. There was a play last week where a lot of us were a bit surprised at his usage. The Colts had 4th and short around Jacksonville's 5-yard line, so that screams power back to you. But they had him in there. He's all 5'9", 196 pounds of him, and they ran him. It didn't work, but they ran him. So they see him. They'll run him on early downs. They don't mind that. And more often than not, he picks up positive yardage, but there is those times, where you maybe need your bigger backs in there. But they'll use him anytime. Last week, he caught all 8 targets. So yes, he is the primary pass catching back, but they'll run him too. He's basically Theo Riddick with a few more carries per game.
Oh, that makes sense. So Rivers in San Diego and I guess LA loved flare outs for the running backs. Just, if the downfield stuff wasn't working, he'd just immediately dump it off to the flare out to the back, maybe get 6 or 7 yards, or if you're really lucky, a 35-yard touchdown or something. Is that how, Hines is being used as a receiver, or is he running like a variety of routes? What's his kind of function? Is it like what Danny Woodhead did with the Chargers, or is it more like what Austin Eckler right now is doing with the Chargers?
Yeah, we see him a little bit everywhere since he came in, I think, in 2018. We've seen him line up out wide in the slot. He gets a lot of his routes out of the shotgun from the backfield. They line him up pretty much everywhere. But when he actually gets the catches, they're closer to the line of scrimmage, like a normal running back dump off. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are going to use him quite a bit. And like you mentioned with Phillip Rivers, you could tell the screen game became an immediate priority for them when they got Rivers, because he was 17 for 17 with targeting running backs last week. And it was really, really productive. Marlon Mack looked great before he went down. Taylor took his first catch 35 yards. Naheem got a touchdown. So I think that's going to be a pretty big staple in this offense moving forward.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, let's unless you've got something, we covered Jack Doyle a little bit. Is there anything else for the other tight ends? Or you want to talk about Wilkins a little bit before you head to the defense, or are we good here? Do you think?
Well, tight end will be a little bit of a question mark this week, I think, because Doyle's been banged up, hasn't practiced yet this week.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So if he can't make it, that leaves Mo Alley Cox as your only experienced healthy tight end. They've also got Noah Tongiai, who they picked up from the Eagles. The Eagles waived him. They really wanted to bring him back to the practice squad, but the Colts kind of sniped him there and picked him up. He's a really athletic field stretcher type. A lot of potential, not quite a molded product yet. But yeah, if Doyle can't play, it's Mo Alley Cox and Noah Tongiai, and they'll at this point in the week they'll probably have to bring someone up off the practice squad because, of course, Trey Burton is on IR.
Right.
On the practice squad, they've got rookie undrafted Farrad Green from Mississippi State and Charlie Tomapo, he's also a rookie from Portland State. So could be looking at Mo Alley Cox, the basketball convert, being the senior leader at tight end this week if Doyle can't play. So that one will be interesting to watch.
That's a little brutal. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about the defense for a second. So some familiar names from outside of the Indianapolis Colts: DeForest Buckner, Justin Houston, along that defensive line. But also it feels like there has been kind of an effort to maybe not replace what they had at that defensive line, but kind of supplement the secondary instead, whereas the defensive line is important, right? Otherwise they wouldn't have traded a first for DeForest Buckner, but it just doesn't feel like it has the same character as the Colts defensive lines with like Mathis and so on that I think we remember. What feels different about the construction of this defensive line to you?
Yeah, so on paper, this should be the best 3-tech they've had in forever, basically. They had Booger McFarland back when they won the Super Bowl in the mid 2000s. They've had some decent players, but never anyone like Buckner. So this defense, they say the 3-tech is what makes the whole engine run. So it's kind of been their mission to try and find a really high level one. So that's why they spent a whole first round pick on Buckner. So the pillars of that defense are the 3-tech. So they have one in Buckner, the will linebacker. They have a 2-time All-Pro in Darius Leonard, and a nickel who can preferably play outside as well. And they've got that in Kenny Moore. And when they re-signed him, I think it was last summer, they made him the highest paid nickel defender in the league. So they think they've got their guys at all three of those pillars. But when you talk about the defensive line specifically, I think they just really liked the prospect of matching someone like Buckner up with Justin Houston, who still has gas in the tank. He had 11 sacks last year. Kamoko Toure could be a really good pass rusher once he comes off of PUP. He had a pretty nasty ankle fracture last year, but wasn't quite ready to start the season. But he according to PFF, he was like the first or second graded defensive end in all of football before he got hurt with TJ Watt. So he's got plenty of potential there once he can come back. They've got Ben Banagoo, who they hope can make a second-year jump. So I think in their eyes, adding the most critical piece to their defense was really important, but especially adding someone like that who can help the rest of his defensive line mates was just too good to pass up.
Has Buckner, I mean, it's been one game, but has Buckner borne out so far?
Yeah, he looked good. I think for people who were box score scouting, they probably were underwhelmed, but he did have one tackle for a loss. But there were more than a few times where he got a really good jump off the line and kind of blew up a lineman or two and disrupted the backfield. So you're not always looking for gaudy stats out of those guys. You're looking for disruption, and I think he brought that.
All right.
I think so far they're going to be pretty pleased with what they've got.
Cool. And then obviously we have to talk about the worst draft pick of the 2018 class, Darius Leonard. Uh, so the guy who said that was a guest on our last podcast. So I always
Justice.
had, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure he still gets stuff about that.
Oh, I send it to him every week. But
That's awesome.
let's talk about these linebackers a little bit, because it's not just Darius Leonard. Obviously, there's Bobby Okereke. I think I've got that. I think he's from Stanford. And then Anthony Walker, I think, is in base. And he is a Big Ten guy, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Northwestern.
Okay, yeah. So what do you get out of this linebacker group? Is it sideline to sideline speed? Is it that Darius Leonard's a complete guy? Is it more of a coverage group? What do you get out of this linebacker unit?
Yeah, lots of speed and length. That's what they shoot for. They pretty much won't pick you up unless you can roam sideline to sideline at any position on their defense. Leonard, he's really small by linebacker standards. I think he played a lot of his first couple years around 218, but he's 6'2" and has really long arms. Bobby Okereke is really similarly, he's a really similar athletic profile. Walker was picked up in 2017 when they still had the 3-4 defense, but he still fits pretty well. He's a fast, smart guy. He reads the run really well. Leonard, his forte is probably the passing game. He's really fast. He's got the long arms and can bat away passes. Rushes the passer pretty well. I think he's had at least 5 sacks in both of his first 2 years. He still needs some work getting off of blocks, but his numbers speak for themselves. He's been the most productive linebacker in the league, arguably, since he's come in. Okereke, he's someone who they've wanted to get on the field more, but in the NFL, you're just so rarely in base defense, and he's their Sam linebacker, which plays the least. So they try to get him on the field more, and it kind of sparked something a little bit in the second half last week. They started to play a little better against the run once Okereke was starting to play more snaps. So they've got a really good, fast, athletic linebacker core. They stay pretty good against the run, but if they had an Achilles heel, it would probably be, sticking strong and getting off blocks in the run game.
Okay. So like in terms of like a matchup with, say, Irv Smith or Kyle Rudolph, or, an angle route from someone like Dalvin Cook, this is a group that you'd be fairly confident in.
Yeah, just because of their speed, their speed and length, that gives them an edge usually. I would say Darius Leonard or Okereke especially. I think someone like Dalvin Cook against Anthony Walker, I think you give the advantage to Cook there. But there's not a lot of linebackers you'd rather have in coverage than Leonard or Okereke.
All right, and then the secondary, I think, is kind of the most interesting for Vikings fans. So we left it for last. Also, that's the natural progression. So let's talk a little bit about Xavier Rhodes. So obviously, one game, I saw that he blew one coverage, but for the most part, allowed like 3 receptions, 33 yards total, according to PFF. One of them was the 22-yarder, which means 2 other receptions for 11 yards. That doesn't seem that bad, but also his PFF grade was like 40. So
yeah, it was not great.
What's the story here? Are you getting all $3 million worth out of him, or what?
Yeah, so I think generally they like what they saw, but both Rhodes and defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus talked about there were 2 plays especially they'd like back from him. He had a pass interference call earlier in the game, and he said he thought it was going back shoulder, but the throw was actually more inside. So just in adjusting, he kind of pulled on the receiver a bit. And then Keelan Cole had, I think, a 22-yard touchdown later in the game. And Rhodes just was not in position at any point from the jump there. I think the play action really got him. He kind of started to float inside, but Cole ran a kind of a deep slant across the field, and he was just never with him. So other than those 2 plays, I think they like what they've got. At cornerback, you can have a good game all game, and then if you blow 1 or 2 things, that totally destroys it, I think PFF gave him a pretty favorable grade against the run, if I saw correctly, and
Yeah.
tackling. So, I
Yeah, they
mean,
did.
there's that. They do say you can't play corner for them if you can't tackle or participate against the run. So they've got that from him. Still communication. They're working on that. There were obvious times you could see the cornerbacks kind of it looked, or not just the cornerbacks, but all the defensive backs kind of looked like they were confused in what was being communicated at times. I think that's a product of not having the off season, so that'll come along.
All right.
But yeah, I think they're just looking for more practice time and more gelling together.
What kind of coverage philosophies are there? So is it do they run sides, or do they have Rocky Sin shadowing somebody? Is it a primarily cover 2, cover 4, cover 3? What are the coverage philosophies that the Colts have been running?
Yeah, it's primarily cover 2. They don't really have anyone shadowing. They haven't had that since Vontae Davis, and they had the more man-based 3-4 defense. But this one it's pretty classically based cover 2. Just sticking to their zones. In certain matchups, they'll switch things up and play a lot more man. It just depends on the matchup. I actually think to correct some of their coverage woes they've had, even dating back to a handful of games late last season, I would think they might tighten things up this week. I asked Eberflus about that when he spoke to the media this week. I said, Gardner Minshew only had one incomplete pass, and you got a guy like Kirk Cousins this week who generally will just take what the defense gives him. Not that he won't go over the top, but he can play timid at times. And so how do you shrink those windows and make him throw more difficult passes? And he said they just have to route the receivers, or they kind of have to bump the receivers a little more off the routes, get a little tighter, more physical. So hopefully they do that this week, because all that cushion has just not been working. We saw Jameis Winston killed them last year. Drew Brees had a historic night against them last year. Gardner Minshew had a diet version of what Drew Brees did to them last week.
19 for 20, but only one pass over 20 yards. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He picked them apart, giving them what they would give him. So something's got to change in coverage, because you just can't win when the quarterback is completing like 95%.
So my impression is that, Kenny Moore's pretty good. Rocky Sin's kind of on the rise. Malik Hooker's pretty good. We just talked about how great Darius Leonard is in coverage. So what the hell, man?
Yeah, I don't know. They generally do a good job of keeping away the deep stuff. They don't get the top taken off of them too often. I just think it's guys can find the soft spots in their zones. It is a lot of their chunk plays. It can be chalked up to that. Guys just maybe a little late picking guys up. Hooker has got outstanding ball instincts, but coverage instincts are still developing for him, I guess. Like last week with Laviska Shenault, like his touchdown was about 20 yards, and at least half of it was yards after catch, and it was just late reacting and kind of taking a poor angle at the time. A lot of this stuff is correctable with some of these guys, because it's just taking different angles to the ball. Because if you start off on the wrong foot and you're taking the wrong angle, you're already toast. So I think it's just correcting small stuff like that should do away with some of the chunk plays and those zone killers.
All right, so we did a bunch of trees for the forest stuff. Let's pull back a little bit. I just want to ask, what when watching the Minnesota offense and the Minnesota defense scares you the most?
So offensively, I think Adam Thielen is a smart receiver. He's a crafty route runner. I think this is a week where he could really eat. I interviewed a Vikings reporter earlier this week. He thinks this could be a good game for Justin Jefferson, because he's been good, at least in college, with finding those soft spots. What scares?
Who did you interview? Let's
Chris Shad from the Homer Horn. And he writes for a handful of spots.
Mm-hmm.
But no, those guys and Kirk Cousins just being able to find those open spots because he likes the broader windows. And if they're going to
Yeah.
provide him, he'll take them. But he'll also go over top if I don't know if you watched last night's game with Browns Bengals, but the route that Odell Beckham put on William Jackson, where he had that kind of double move with the deep shot.
Beautiful. He ran it a
Yeah.
couple of times, but Jackson got the jersey one of those times.
Yeah, exactly. That just seems like something Adam Thielen might be able to eat on. And, Xavier Rhodes knows the Vikings, but the Vikings also know him. So those will be interesting things to look defensively.
Thielen did eat him a little bit in camp the past couple of years on stuff like that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I would imagine the advantage there is for Thielen. Defensively, I think the Colts are lucky that this is a totally different defensive line for the Vikings than what we would have seen, last year. Everson Griffin out, Daniil Hunter not in there. Yannick Ngakoue is in there, so they're familiar with him, so they know what he can do. The linebackers scare me for sure. Eric Kendricks is one of the best inside linebackers in the league. And then the safeties. I don't know if the Colts are really going to be able to push things too deep because of Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris. Phillip Rivers isn't necessarily Aaron Rodgers, but it does give me hope for the Colts bouncing back, knowing that the Packers were able to kind of kill them through the air and on the ground. But the matchups looked great for them last week too, and it just didn't happen. Their offense was productive. They didn't run for as many yards as you would expect. I think it was just 88. So I expect them to run a little more on Minnesota. But I think they just have to take advantage of the position groups they have that are better and not shoot themselves in the foot so much.
So, what matchup would you be chasing when the Colts are on offense?
I would get T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell very much involved. Campbell versus Mike Hughes in the slot is something I've really been looking at. I don't know exactly who T.Y. Hilton will be matched up with. He primarily plays outside. I know Holton Hill is definitely bigger than him. And Jeff Gladney hasn't been playing much yet. Who is the other corner I'm forgetting?
Cameron Dantzler. He's been hurt all week, so we'll see if he plays. But if he doesn't, it would be Jeff Gladney, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I really thought Hilton would just blow the Jaguars apart last week because their cornerbacks were so inexperienced, and it was going to be C.J. Henderson against T.Y. Hilton, which I liked Henderson coming out of the draft, but he's a rookie against a veteran with a veteran quarterback.
He seemed like a raw rookie, too.
Yeah, that's what I thought. One of those real athletic guys, maybe not so physical, but he looked great against Hilton last week.
Yeah, no kidding.
I would think Hilton has the advantage this week against those corners, but again, I said that last week. We'll see. Paris Campbell looked great, though. Caught 6 of 8 targets for 71 yards, I think, and late in the game, he was if one of Rivers' downfield throws was maybe a yard more inside or a foot more inside, Campbell would have had a 26-yard touchdown to add to that. So I think Campbell looks great so far. Him and Mike Hughes in the slot, that's the battle I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, fair enough. And then actually just taking a quick look at I know we already but these look like there's some super athletes at receiver, right? Because you've got obviously Darius Fountain, who might not play at all, but he's a super athlete testing out of Northern Iowa. Then Ashton Doolin, another undrafted free agent, crazy super athlete. Paris Campbell, super athlete. Has that been an emphasis when they've gone about acquiring receivers? Because I just noticed this, but they all run like 4.3 40s.
Yeah, that's what they target is big guys who are fast. They want guys who can consistently beat man coverage. A lot of the times the guys they take are more on the raw side. Michael Pittman was probably the most polished of the big receivers they've taken in the last few years. But in their eyes, they'll work with them and develop them into more complete receivers. But they want the tools there to be able to beat press man coverage. Not all the guys have worked out. Fountain's coming along. He was just elevated this week from the practice squad. He probably would have made the roster last year. He was probably the story of training camp. He was dominant. He was putting guys on posters every day. Again, Desmond Patman, another big guy who ran a good 40. I think his was like in the 4.4s or so. Ashton Dulin, like you said. So yeah, size and speed is a huge trademark of this. And guys like Paris Campbell, they're starting to really come along with it. Pittman. I can't imagine he'll take too long to develop because he wasn't all that raw coming out. So
Yeah, fair enough. All right, well, let's get a game prediction out of you, and then we can let you go. Colts favored by 3. Do with that what you will.
yeah.
How do you think the game goes?
I'm actually gonna flip their score from last week, but I'll give them the advantage. I'd like to see them score in the high 20s, so I'll give them 27. I know that Minnesota's offense is going to be capable of scoring too, so I'll give them 20. So I'll say Colts 27-20.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on. Is there anything you want to plug?
I guess just my written work over at allcolts.com, Sports Illustrated's Colts website, and then the brand new podcast that just came out. The trailer came out this week, and the first episode dropped this morning. That's the Believe in Colts podcast, BLEAV. And yeah, I'll be doing at least 2 shows a week there, wrapping up the most present game and then previewing the next one. So that is now out pretty much anywhere podcasts are found, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, all those good things. So
awesome. Thanks so much, man.
No, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from AJ Askew, who asks, question, do you think T.Y. will present a similar problem as Davante Adams did last week? And which corner do you think is best suited to stop him?
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Obviously, it depends on whether or not Cameron Dantzler is active. Dantzler showcased he's got the ability to keep up with speed receivers, even though he kind of lost footing at the end of the completion on the Marquez Valdez-Scantling throw. But if he can keep maintaining that speed, if he doesn't have that rib injury by the time game day starts, that's actually probably an interesting one, right? Because you wouldn't expect somebody that's a taller receiver that didn't have the speed coming out of the combine to be the guy to cover not just a really fast receiver like T.Y. Hilton, but a pretty quick one that's a pretty decent route runner. But he might have kind of the all-around tools that you want. If he is, in fact, a better player, and that's the reason he took so many more snaps than Gladney, that might be kind of who you want. I would typically go like with Holton Hill, right? But he's coming off of just this abysmal game, which I don't think is as bad as the stat line says. Like I think, for example, at least 2 of those deep throws to Davante Adams for Hill were actually really good coverage, and it was just the perfect throw that happens. And then also the first couple of passes that he gave up, which is always a bad sentence to start with, but the first couple of passes he gave up, it seemed like the scheme was laying him out to dry just as much as his own talent level was, because he was supposed to playoff coverage, and they got rid of the ball quickly. That said, it's not like he had a good game secretly, and I'm just he had a bad game, but it probably just wasn't as bad as it seems. But the Vikings seem to have indicated that he's what they think of as their best corner, because he spent the most time on Davante Adams. They didn't switch him off Adams until later, and Adams was still productive regardless. So there's that. Given his speed, given Hilton's speed, I don't know that I'm super comfortable with Mike Hughes, because Hughes is kind of an all-around defensive back, but he doesn't have, that deep downfield speed. Plus, he's not really showcasing the potential that he had his rookie year. It's been a bit since he's been really good. He had a pretty bad game as well. It just wasn't as high profile because he wasn't up against Adams. But he got pretty lost too, and I don't think he's got the downfield potential. So yeah, I think it's between Hill and Dantzler. I don't know that Gladney has the speed. He probably has the quickness, but that might be a sides thing where the Vikings just decide to go sides and kind of see what happens and just shade a safety. Or that could be a matchup thing based off of who's healthy.
Next question is going to be from Bob Marks, who asks, how many points do we give up to Phil Rivers?
Well, they didn't give up too many points last year to Rivers, so there's that. But Rivers was on a worse team that is also cursed. So you can't just use that. I think they only gave up 10 points to the Chargers last year. And that was a pretty good receiving core. Mike Williams was causing fits. They had Keenan Allen healthy, I think. But I mean, this offensive line for the Colts is just really remarkable. So um, I don't expect Rivers to like go off or anything like that. We talk about that more obviously in the interview, but he's probably going to score more than 10 points. I mean, the Vikings defense is just not as good. So I expect the Vikings to blitz a little bit less. And I expect them to drop 8 into coverage or drop 7 into coverage a lot more. So we'll kind of see, but I think it's going to be less boom busty than some of the throws that Rodgers is able to get away with. So probably I think fewer points, but yeah, I mean fewer than 43 is like not a remarkable prediction. Like
it's like
but,
it's like being told that you're better than TJ Clemming. Is that something?
Yeah, exactly. But I think NFL average is like what 28 or something like that. Yeah, I think they hold them below 30.
Anton asks, is the reason that we're losing right now is because we are missing Treadwell in some way on special teams?
You'd think, but they've got Dan Chisna, so all is well.
Slaby asks, what are you hearing from your sources, Arif? What did Josh Klein do? Is this an ideal situation to bring a solid right guard into your system? And what's the holdup?
I don't have sources on this, but I will say my guess is that it's like a team fit, scheme fit thing, which is weird, right? Because they signed him in the first place. But yeah, I don't know. I thought he played pretty well. Who knows, man? They're clearly not interested.
Also, with Elflein on the shelf, or in this case, with Elf on the shelf, thank you, do we need to worry about a limit on the number of players who can come back from IR? Should a 3-week IR system be the default in the future, like a 10-day injured reserve list for baseball?
So I think it's good for football to have that and good for teams. And so I think it's good, right? I think we should consider it. But it is a little frustrating on my end when my job is to provide information or context to fans. Like a player goes in IR and I'm just like, so yeah, I don't know. They could be out for 3 weeks or 15. Who knows? We have to either know that the injury is just so obviously severe that they can't come back, like Marlon Mack's Achilles injury, or somebody has to leak something, right? So like Courtney Cronin was able to report that the neck issue for Danielle Hunter is probably short term, right? So from the ability to do my job, I would like a little bit more clarity, or maybe another system that would be able to provide that clarity. I don't know how you could really do it because the beauty of IR is that it clears up a roster spot for you. And then from a cash flow perspective, there's a bunch of contracts that are written in a way where you provide a lot less cash to the player. And then obviously the salary cap has a unique impact there. It would be nice if that there was some way to kind of to straddle that divide and say, a 3-week IR would provide you with half a roster spot. So you need 2 people on 3-week IR before you can add somebody. You take the full cap hit, but you still clear up the roster spot or something along those lines. I would like a 2-tiered system for injured reserve that would allow you to have that 3-week and allow you to quickly sign a player to resolve injury. At least have a backup at a position without it getting like too wibbly wobbly abusive, kind of like how the teams are kind of doing it right now. So yeah, I'd like it, but probably you modify it a little bit.
Or at least just have more leaks.
Yeah, just normalize leaking all the information to reporters.
Yeah, let's
obviously
open information here. You're just trying to help. Professor Poop asks, between Rhodes and our young cornerbacks, I'm expecting to get enough samples to be able to do a thesis on this game. What other matchups do you think I should be keeping an eye on?
I would say the Vikings tackles against or defensive tackles against Quentin Nelson. That's going to provide you with some pretty remarkable samples for you to kind of further develop your world-renowned poopiness index. I would say that, I mean, Hilton versus whoever you like that question earlier, I think that's like kind of just an interesting one. Like maybe, right? That's an area to worry. The Colts have developed a pretty good running game. Again, even with Marlon Mack out, Jonathan Taylor looks really fast. So, maybe we'll get to see some Anthony Harris versus Nyheim Hines or Jonathan Taylor samples. Who knows? That would not end well for the Vikings. And then probably on the other side of the ball, Darius Leonard versus the tight ends. I totally can see Kirk Cousins throwing an underneath pick to one of these talented linebackers. It just seems like it makes sense. So that's probably what I would take a look at.
Nick asks, we couldn't get to Rodgers even against a poor line. What is Indy's line going to do against our front seven?
I'll combine this a little bit with the Yannick Ngakoue question we got. I think a big part of the problem was that Rodgers just got rid of the ball really quickly, which is something I covered in my mailbag, where my bigger issue was with the secondary than it was with the defensive line. And I kind of explained, like, a lot of it just has to do with the fact that about 71% of Rodgers' passes, more than anyone else in the league in week one, he got rid of the ball in under 2.5 seconds. And that includes obviously those tap passes and stuff like that, but it also includes just a lot of plays where they were just throwing a quick out. And so before pressure arrived, to my eyes, I thought actually that the defensive line was doing a pretty reasonable job beating the player in front of them. It would have been nice if they called holding a little bit more on the tackles. It seemed like Eddie Yarborough could have had a couple more pressures if he was given a little bit more of a standard treatment by an offensive lineman. But without that, with the Packers' particular technique that looks a lot like holding, but evidently isn't, which again, we've referenced before. There's a video on it. We linked it in the show notes in the past. But I think that against talented offensive linemen, they'll probably find a way to generate pressure without necessarily having to send a blitz. And then to cover this question that we also got about Yannick Ngakoue versus his familiarity with the Colts, I went back and looked at his statistics going all the way back to when he was drafted in 2016, because he's played 8 games against the Colts over the last 4 years, and I looked up his ability to generate pressure. So over the last 4 years, right, the 4 years that he's played the Colts, he's had 37 pressures in 258 pass rushing snaps. So a couple of pieces of context. If you double that, you get 16 games, right? So that's about 74. This is all by PFF. And that would be among the league leaders in total pressures. That's a really great season to have. If you've got these 16 games against the Colts as your season, then you're probably 3rd or 4th in total pressures. So that's great. And in terms of pressure rate, that's 17th. So that's not bad, right? That's above average, right? Because you got 2 edge rushers, so you got 64 starting edge rushers. So that's above average. That's great. But if you only look at the last 3 years and excuse his rookie year, which, that's a little bit of endpoint finding. It's a little bit, friendly to do that. But I typically, when I'm looking at a player, look at their past 3 years. So it's not too abusive in terms of statistics. He has 31 pressures and 190 pass rushing snaps. So that's over 6 games. And that is a pressure rate of 16.3%, which would rank 7th over the course of an entire year. And in terms of total pressures, if you prorate that out to 16 games, that's 83 total pressures, which would have led the league last year, right ahead of Zadarius Smith, who had 82. So that's not bad. I would take that, right? He's been pretty effective against Anthony Costanzo or whoever they've put out there at offensive tackle. From a pressure rate perspective, he's operated like a high-level pass rusher. From a total pressure perspective, he's operated as an elite pass rusher. I tend to think that the answer is usually somewhere in between, because pressure rate biases towards pass rushers that have a lot of opportunities on 3rd down and are rotational guys. And so pressure rate doubles on 3rd down, sack rates double on 3rd down. And so it looks a lot better if you get more 3rd down snaps. So total pressures, normally I don't love getting away from rate stats, but total pressures and pressure rate together kind of give you a full picture. And to give you a good idea for why that would be the case, Jared Allen, I think, was maybe 10th in pressure rate the year he set the Vikings record for sacks and nearly set the league record for sacks. And no one would argue that he was the 10th best edge rusher in the NFL that year. And that's because a lot of the people that were above him got a lot more situational snaps than he did. And then there's also the fact that he was able to kind of time when he wanted to unleash his pass rushing moves, because on 1st and 2nd down, he would technically be pass rushing, but would be using his normal set of moves. And then on third down, he would use a counter move or something like that he'd been setting up all game. So it had a bigger impact on the game in terms of things like expected points, but it looks like a lower pressure rate. So the truth is, I think for edge rushers that have every snap, like Yannick Ngakoue, like Daniil Hunter now, it's somewhere between total pressures and pressure rate. And so somewhere between when he plays the Colts, he's the best defensive end in the NFL. And when he plays the Colts, he's the 7th best defensive end or edge rusher in the NFL. It's somewhere in between there. That's not bad. So if the Vikings are comfortable with his conditioning and are comfortable with his role in the defense to have him play more snaps, I think that there's something there in terms of the ability to generate pressure on Phillip Rivers, who is significantly less mobile than Aaron Rodgers. And I think they're not going to blitz because the Rivers is, even compared to other Pro Bowl quality quarterbacks or other quarterbacks with his history of production and talent, he's still remarkably good against the blitz, even after you account for a cohort that includes people like Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, etc. So I would think that they want to rush 4, and I think that they're actually, despite how good the Colts offensive line is, kind of comfortable with some of their opportunities there.
Next question is going to be from Josh S., who asks, is Cousins learning to improvise and use his legs the equivalent of Happy Gilmore learning to putt? I kept that in for a very simple reason. That is a fantastic question.
That's fantastic. I wish I could say yes, but no, right? Because Happy Gilmore's thing was that he could just like rocket it 500 yards or whatever. And like Cousins without scrambling is not Tom Brady, right? Like it's not like, Tom Brady got legs, now he's unstoppable, which would be the case, right? Happy Gilmore with putting, unstoppable, right? But I love the analogy because it took Happy forever to learn how to putt.
It did.
It took Cousins a little bit of time.
The price is wrong, Bob.
Rip Chubbs. His name was Chubbs, right?
It was Chubbs.
Yeah, wow. Appropriate timing for that then.
Andrew Shad asks, how does Zimmer and co. avoid another embarrassing cross-conference blowout that seems to become a once-a-year occurrence? And why does that seem to keep happening? You have done the research.
Mostly I didn't do the research as to why. Just, does this happen? Because yes. I read this question and I was like, wait, is that a thing? Because I remember the Bills thing.
Yep.
That was embarrassing. Does this keep happening? So I went back. I decided to only go back to 2016 because like losses when Zimmer took over the Leslie Frazier Vikings, like who cares about them? But so 2019, we don't have a very good one. The only AFC loss was to the Kansas City Chiefs. It is a little embarrassing because it was to Matt Moore, who was that offseason employed by the Dolphins as a scout. And so like sometime during the preseason, Andy Reid was like, you still know how to throw a ball. So we're just going to sign you. And so that's who they lost to. So that's kind of embarrassing, but the Chiefs did like win the Super Bowl that year.
That kind of balances it out a bit.
Right. Yeah. It's like not that bad, but yeah, they were 17-point favorites against the Bills, lost that. That was pretty bad. That was the Everson Griffin is missing. We don't know why game. 2017 was the 26-9 loss to the Steelers, which is embarrassing, but also not that embarrassing because it was like, that was the Case Keenum game, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. That was like Case Keenum's first start after Bradford went down. And everyone was like, well, yeah, I guess that's it for the season. Keenum sucks. And then he got to go against the Buccaneers, who were giving up 40 points a game to everybody, right? And because they had given up like I think maybe 80 combined points in the 2 previous games, and so Keenum like dunks on the Buccaneers, and we're just like, well, does that count? I don't know.
Turns out he always does that against the Bucs too. So
yeah, and he's been historically incredible against the Bucs. And then they lose to the Lions, and you're like, yeah, okay, I think I figured out what this is. This is just a lost season.
Yeah,
and then just rattled off a ton of wins. But that Steelers game was bad. But I like an embarrassing-ish, but like not outside the realm of expectation. And then 2016, a 34-6 loss to the Colts that honestly I don't even remember. It was 2016. It was week 15, which means that the Vikings had already like lost their 5-0 magic, right? Because they go 5-0, they go up against the Eagles, they lose. I remember that because my mentions were aflame.
I remember naming that
then,
episode the Philadelphia incident and encouraging people to listen to that and getting a bunch of people going, wow, that was some hateful stuff. And I went, yeah. As it turns out, Bill Burr was pissed that day.
yeah, then they lose to the Bears and then the Lions the next week, I think. And then Washington. And then they got like a pity win against Arizona. Yeah, so that loss to the Colts, 34-6. That's pretty bad. It might have been their biggest loss of the season, but like also like who cares? So I don't know if that counts as embarrassing either, right? But the trend holds. You know, out of the 4 AFC opponents, there's a game they should have won that they didn't, or at least that they shouldn't have gotten blown out of. But I think this is a spurious trend. If you're a 75% win rate team, you're a really good team. And that means you're going to lose to one of your 4 AFC opponents. So yeah, whatever. Why does it keep happening? Because statistics are weird.
Yes, let's go with that. Or that it's your fault, Andrew. It's your fault.
Right. It's because you noticed, actually.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. Let's just real quick. Let's figure out who it would be if it's not the Colts, right? Because there's the Titans, which might be embarrassing. The Texans, which might be embarrassing. And then the Jaguars. Oh, yeah, it's the Jaguars. That's way more embarrassing.
Yeah. Also, is the roof of Lucas Oil, if the roof of Lucas Oil got stuck shut, how many seasons could the Colts play before anyone noticed? Is there any better proof of how useless retractable roofs are?
Man, yeah. Did they ever? Because they don't. Maybe for like monster truck rallies and stuff, like off-season stuff, they open it up.
I mean, I don't know. The only retractable roof stadium that I am aware of that consistently opens up is the one in for the Cowboys.
Oh, I think the Falcons one does.
Oh, yep, the Falcons. Well, yes, because that's Megatron's butt. Like that's that's what that's referred to as, and it does have the ability to open. But I think part of the problem was in its opening.
The sphincter is active. Yes.
Yes, but the problem was in the opening season it got stuck, and
it did. Okay, I'm googling retractable roof open Lucas Oil. We'll see if. Yeah, I know. Okay, so Wikipedia tells me that it's possible. That's great. Thank you. There's stadiumroofstatus.com. Do they have like a hit, or do they just tell you that it's open now?
That would be the most useless website in the middle of like. Why would you need to know at midnight on a Thursday night in September whether or not Lucas Oil is open? Unless you're trying to break in.
It also has future events, but they're all to be determined in terms of roof status. So I don't know how helpful that is.
This is my shocked face. Yes.
In fairness, 4 of the 5 future events are postponed due to COVID-19. But the other one, the Circle City Classic, is on September 26th, and the roof status is to be determined.
Well then,
there are videos of the roof opening. So it does happen, but like. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, Kenneth Allen asks, who will play worse, Rhodes or the Vikings' best starting corner?
Man. So Rhodes he got burned for like a big one. And we're recording this before we actually talk to the guest, so we'll see what his opinion on Rhodes's play was. But my impression was that he was not like consistently horrible or anything like that. He was like mostly fine, and then he got burned for like a huge play, which of course like Vikings Twitter took with it and ran, and I don't really like blame them for that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, he got like a pretty abysmal PFF grade, so who knows. But yeah, my impression was that like he wasn't necessarily all that bad. Let's see how much he gave up according to PFF. Let's see. 3 receptions on 3 targets for 33 yards. Well, that's not bad. 22 of those came on 1 play. Yeah, who knows? But I would imagine that given that I'm uncertain about all 3 or 4 cornerbacks for the Vikings, there's some probability that one of them will definitely be worse. Some possibility, definitely. That's what I just said.
Some possibility, definitely. Wow.
Well, in this case, it means that there's some probability that they would be obviously worse, not like there's a 60% chance of a 100% chance. No, it's just like, oh yeah, that guy's clearly the worst guy on the field, sort of thing. My words make sense, James.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around some possibility, definitely.
But the definitely just refers to how easily we can identify it.
Whatever helps you sleep.
I do words for a living. I know what I'm talking about.
I word as an adult, okay?
I am the English, and you will listen to me.
That's not terrifying at all. Swervin Shervin asks, while I was fully prepared to smoke some pork belly this weekend, I'm here on the West Coast where everything is on fire. Contributing to the smoke is probably not ideal. What indoor long-term food projects would you recommend? Well, everyone else seems to be doing pickling, so why not just start pickling?
Well, I think the pickling is like a survival instinct thing. Like everyone's like, oh, the world's ending. I better preserve some food.
I just assumed that the pickling thing was like was the second step after everyone making sourdough bread over COVID quarantine.
Yeah, we only ended up like baking 3 loaves. What a waste of all the flour we bought.
Like I don't want to go to the store for flour. We're just gonna make sourdough. It'll be fine. We've got our culture.
And the thing is, it was like hella good. Like it was really good, and it was just like, yeah, I want to like do it again.
It's just one of those things. Like, okay, you did it just to say you did it. And like, okay, well, everyone else on social media
tweeted them.
Yeah, everyone else on social media is doing this, so we will do this as well. It's like putting your cat in the bread, like cat's head through the piece of bread. And okay, well, this is done. Now we can stop torturing the cat. We can stop pretending that we are going to be making this every week.
Brutal. I will say I like kind of like long sous vides and long marinades. So like one of the best things I'd ever eaten was a 3-day sous vide short rib. Which like for most meats don't do this because they'll just like break apart and dissolve and you'll be sad. But like short rib has like enough structure to it that it can withhold it. And we sous vide it inside, obviously a sous vide bag, but in that bag we had a little bit of red wine. And that was one of the most delicious things that I've ever done. But you can do a lot of sous videing that it might take a long time that gives you like long-term projects. That can give you, some stuff that if you sear it off later, ends up with like really interesting textures. Like you can sous vide pork belly, for example, like in your example, for a very long time and a very little amount of marinade, and then take it out, dry it off, and then just sear the hell out of it, and it's delicious. It's a consistency that you would never get from another cooking method because it just requires a specific temperature at a very long period of time. And there's a really, I think, pretty fair backlash to sous vide because the thing about it is that you get the temperature that you want, but the texture is always a little bit different than if you use another cooking method. And so a lot of chefs have decided that though you get kind of the perfect doneness with a sous vide steak, the texture is not really the same as if you do a high heat method. And so you'll sacrifice a little bit of that gradient to get a better toothsome pressure. And I get that. That makes sense. But I think for something like pork belly or short rib, the fact that this is a unique texture is something that is like really difficult to get over in terms of just how wonderful and delicious it is. That said, I've also had short rib that has been cooked in like a braise over like 18 hours as well, and that's a totally different texture, and it's tender and it's delicious as well. So I mean, like both of those are really incredible. But I think finding long-term methods to cook via sous vide is probably a good indoor cooking thing. And then also, a lot of people don't like liquid smoke, and I get it. but it is literally just smoke. It's not like this artificial whatever. They just capture smoke under condensation and bottle it. So long as you get a reasonably high quality one, which is pretty easy. And while that won't substitute a lot of the smoke flavor you get from smoking while sous videing, it does capture a lot of it. So it won't get everything, but it will capture a lot of it. And I do recommend that for things that you want to end up having taste barbecue-y.
I've also gone the route of, if you're talking like kind of longer term things, taking a big thing of corned beef and turning that into pastrami. And
absolutely.
Yep. Just doing a fairly long brine of it, and then end up, I believe I tossed it in the pressure cooker for a while, and did that, and that turned out pretty well. I enjoyed that personally, because it was a couple of weeks after we had gotten back from New York, or I had gotten back from New York, and I was jonesing for the pastrami sandwich from the world famous Katz's Deli, and I needed something similar, and I didn't get exactly what I wanted, but it felt better. It's like the DTs were gone from it, so I was pleased about that at least. So that might also be something you could find interesting. Don from Ohio finishes us off with 2 questions. First, Dear James, perhaps we got off on the wrong foot after the last podcast and subsequent tweets about grilling. Pretend, for those who are not on Twitter, which I envy you greatly at times, Don and I went back and forth about something that he thought that he knew and he didn't. He thought that I had said that all propane grilling stuff was terrible and that I would never use it. I do use it. I have one. You can't grill in North Dakota in October without doing that. You need that. You can't have what I have, which is which is like a firebox situation for a smoker, where it's a sidecar. You can't do that very well in October. You're not going to sit out there in 32-degree weather for 6-8 hours or 4-6 hours and maintain the fire the way you're supposed to. No, you can use propane. It's going to be fine. And propane stuff, usually you don't end up going for that long anyway. So, but there was a disagreement, and I had said, no, not only do I eat propane food, it's not necessarily what I prefer, but I use it, and I have one, and I've had one since I think like 2013, 2014. It's the same one that's just followed me, and I keep it. In fact, today I went out and I replaced the propane, which is apparently difficult in North Dakota for some reason. Like there's some sort of a propane can shortage. So, but I haven't run into a propane or into a situation where there's a charcoal shortage anywhere. I'm just saying, just throwing that out. But
putting that out there. But there's always charcoal.
Back to Don from Ohio's question. He said, pretend this is the subreddit, explain like I'm 5, and explain in detail why electricity and grilling are a no-no.
Floor is yours, dude.
Listen, I've done this the last few episodes. Like, I just have a problem philosophically with it. Because if you're looking at...
There's no structural reason, no textural reason, no taste reason.
Not well.
It's just an essential feature of outdoor cooking that you can't introduce electricity into the food itself.
If you are cooking outdoors, to me, that implies fire. And how you get fire is the question. Do you get it from having like an oven outside, which is basically what the Traeger grills are. You're heating it up through there and using the smoke pellets and all that. Or do you get it from actually starting the fire? It's the question of like, it's purely a question of process. And I prefer that as the process. It's eventually I will bend on this and get myself a Traeger and be like, oh my God, this is so much easier. But I enjoy the challenge of doing the sidecar thing. But it is much easier. I know this because it has to be. Some of these cooks that I have, where it's 3 or 4 hours in, and the charcoal has died, or what, and I looked away for just a little bit, and I wasn't maintaining the fire properly, and now I've got the meat wrapped up, but my temperature's dropping, and I'm trying not to overshoot it too high, and all that, and it's crazy. But I have a problem with it philosophically. I don't have a problem necessarily with it taste wise. I do enjoy the taste of the now that I'm much more versed in it with the charcoal over propane, and I haven't done much work with electricity and Traeger stuff, but it's just a philosophy thing. It's, to me, if you're cooking outside, it should involve fire, and there's no visible fire inside of something like a Traeger. That's my only thing. It's purely philosophical. It's this dumb hill I've decided to die on, and eventually I'm just going to decide it's not worth it and, sell out. And I'm totally fine with this. I've already recognized that I'm full of crap and that I will eventually sell out on this. It's, as long as you don't take yourself too seriously, you should be fine in most things in life anyway. Finally, from Don from Ohio, he asks, because of you two talking about him so much on this podcast, I started watching Binging with Babish on YouTube, and my girlfriend and I are completely hooked. We came across
fantastic. Wow.
Yeah.
We actually made someone's life better for once.
For once. We came across the video on how to make the car panini from Family Guy, and no matter what he did, all of his attempts came out tasting like crap. Then he asked his viewers if they could make one that was edible. Did James or Arif take him up on this offer to make an edible sandwich? If so, what were the results? I'm sorry, but you just can't make Vienna sausages and chocolate edible. That's just not something you can do in my world.
So I'm guessing, very likely, what ended up happening was he probably tried to replace the chocolate with a mole, which obviously would work very well with the whatever the nacho substitute was going to be, and he just couldn't get everything to work together because all of these flavors hate each other, which was the point of the thing. And so to have anything that would retain any of the essence of the other flavors would violate fundamental principles of the way humans taste food. So I did not try it. I'm very comfortable with that fact. There's nothing that you could do that would make me think that that's a good idea.
So here's my thing. If the whole BA test kitchen thing hadn't exploded in a just supernova of all sorts of uncomfortableness, what better way to end the gourmet make stuff with a series of episodes based on the individual items? All right, now you have to make Vienna sausage. Really? Why? Okay. Okay. Can I get Brad to help on this? Why? And then okay, you have done all of these things. Now you must make a good tasting. You must make a good tasting car panini. And just watch her walk off set. I don't need this. I have a book deal. I'm out. You people make or this could be one of those episodes where Chris comes in and he tastes the panini and has to remake it. Is this a Cadbury egg? Wait. Let me. I've got the blindfold on. Let me feel the bread. What kind of bread is this? Is there a cheese in this? What a proper way to give a middle finger to the BA test kitchen that's basically quit en masse. Do you have a favorite type of grilled sandwich like that for panini? I feel like if we're going to answer this question, we should give the audience something.
Man, so I just feel like, first of all, grilled cheese is grilled cheese, right? It's really good. And so anything that you add to it, you're always going to ask a question, is it better than, me just taking away the thing that I just added, right? So that's a problem, right? But I think that having a 3-cheese grilled cheese sandwich plus a a fresh tomato, like, and I think any tomato that's not fresh, like, really ruins it. But like a pretty fresh tomato that maybe like one of your neighbors grew or that you knew was grown and cut that day, because tomatoes can become mealy pretty quickly. That, I think, holds up pretty well just there by itself. I know that a bunch of people are really grossed out by, you've probably heard the mayonnaise trick. You do the mayonnaise on the outside.
Yes, my wife had mentioned that as a possibility because we were a little low on bread or on butter one day. I was like, no, I'm going to go to the store.
It is something that people do on purpose without being low on butter, and they swear by it. And I've tried it, and it's really good. Like I was
really.
I experiment, right?
Did I
didn't come to this turkey take until I'd had 10 iterations of turkey. I gotta give foods a chance.
Did I tell you? I forget if I've told this story on the show before. My wife and I had this like a playful argument at one point before we got married. I believe it was shortly before we got married, and I was sitting at home and I was peeling an orange with my thumb. And she was like, "What the hell are you doing? Use a knife. What are you doing?" And I go, "No, I peel oranges with my fingers. This is something I've always done. I have these massive hands. Like I feel like I am. Yeah, this is just what I do. So I peel an orange with my hands, with my thumbs." She goes, "Whatever, that's gross. Just use a man-made technology. You should use the technology that man created. Do not get out of the Stone Age and use a knife like a normal human being." I was like, "No, whatever." So the first person I thought to confirm whether or not I was crazy or she was wrong was Dusty. And so I text Dusty. And I say, "Dusty, how do you peel an orange?" And he said,
let's evaluate the sanity, that the state of mind you have to be in when you're like, all right, sanity check. Who's the most sane person I know?
Mm-hmm.
Dusty.
So I messaged Dusty, say, "Dusty, how do you peel an orange? Do you use a knife or do you use your thumbs?" And you know what that bastard told me?
Knife.
Like, nope. He said, "I've been using a spoon since I was a little kid."
What? See, this is why you can't ask Dusty stuff.
And I replied to him, "Oh, what the fuck ever? How are we even friends?" Like,
that's so great.
It's like, I was looking for some sort of validation, and you, sir, gave me the exact opposite. This is your fault.
That's amazing.
And yeah, so I was like, I couldn't remember if I had shared that on the show or anything, but it was one of the funnier interactions I've had with anyone in a long time. So thank you, Dusty, for that. That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We will be back next week with a review of the game and also a preview of the next. Arif, where can they find your work?
Yeah, you can go to theathletic.com. If you want to go to my author page, theathletic.com/author/Arif-Hassan. Obviously, I also post my articles on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL.
Yeah. You sounded more subdued in there, like, okay.
No, I was figuring out the answer to this kicker question that we raised off air. I have an update.
Oh no. All right. Well, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much. And please remember to always bring your wine towel. And we will see you soon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.